Hi, everyone around the entire world, and happy holidays. Chocolate, Fluffy, and I want to thank you so much for all of your wonderful, warm, get well wishes during this terrible influenza flu bug that I've had since December 9th. I really am only getting my voice back for the first time today. And I had a flu shot in October. I get one every year. But for some reason, the flu bugs making people sick in any particular town or city don't always match each year's different flu shot. Plus, I had just been in Los Angeles working on Ancient Aliens. And in both of the flights going and coming, there were people who were sneezing and they were coughing. And I remember thinking, oh, Lord, I'm in a tin can with 33 billion viruses. It'll be a miracle if I get out of this without getting sick. No miracle. The virus got me. But maybe there should be a new airline rule we could all ask for, that everyone traveling from November to January in the United States must wear a surgical mask to help keep all the germs from going from person to person inside of those airplanes. Well, my dear Fluffy and my dear Chocolate, they are not sick. Look at these guys. Talk about holiday creatures that you'd want to find not only under your Christmas tree, but everywhere in the house playing. I love them so much, and I know how much you guys do from the letters and the cards that you send me. So the next thing that we're going to do after seeing these beautiful guys is we're going to start with your video questions and answers, which have really been a fun challenge. And Brad, let's start with where we're going to, not the Q&A first. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you some videotape from 1 week ago on December 11th, 2019. It was done by 65-year-old Steve Barone, who is retired and has been studying the night sky near Las Vegas since 2014. His home is on a raised region of Las Vegas foothills, and at night he often sees strange moving lights that do not seem to be helicopters or small planes or jets or airliners or noisy drones. All the strange light activity, he says, seems silent. Now, Steve lives in the Summerlin suburb of Las Vegas, which is the red circle at the middle of the map. What you are now going to see, he photographed on a Luna Optics night vision monocular. A monocular is a modified refracting telescope to see at night. Steve thinks the unidentified aerial object was over the Little Red Rocks, about 2.5 miles west of the Summerlin suburb. The small glowing object emerges, going down from a large glowing object, and then returns to the unidentified aerial object. According to Steve Barone, a few local residents that he knew contacted law enforcement to find out if there was some kind of recovery or other mission in that Little Red Rocks region west of Las Vegas, but no confirmations. Steve Barone told me today that he will continue his videotaping because whether it is another intelligence mimicking our world in order not to be detected, or it is law enforcement working with new and more silent aerial technologies, none of us know. So he's going to keep on looking and videotaping. Now, with that in mind, for those of you out there who may have be in Las Vegas or some other city, and you're seeing any kind of unusual light activity, what was just videotaped, get in touch with me at earthfiles@earthfiles.com. always think of a reporter who files news about the Earth, and I am very interested in seeing some of these videotapes with the idea, especially if they're totally silent, is it a technology from someplace else that mimics our world? And that is worth investigating. So now, thank you all who have sent in your video questions. We are now going to start with number 1.
Hi Linda, season's greetings from sunny Scotland. My question is, over the years, what has been your most favourite case? Thank you so much, lots of love and light. Bye.
Thank you for that good question. I thought a lot about these many decades that I have been investigating the world. And I think when I think of favorite, the one thing that I would say was sort of like a huge favorite section of a lot of investigation are the crop circles in England, in the Vale of Pewsey and around. And especially in the years 1992 to 1995. That was the very beginning of my investigations those summers, and there were no rumors of any of the Team Satan and the other circle makers that would come later. It was a magical time when you got off the airplane and you got out on the M4 and you got into the Vale of Pewsey. It was palpable. You could feel something electric in the air that was unlike any place I had ever been before or since. And the memory that I want to share with you on this whole idea of a favorite is, it was July 16th, 1992, when something came very clear to me. It was in a formation that was below what is known as Milk Hill, 400-foot long, huge pattern for back then. Meandering paths with 5 circles didn't make any beautiful picture from the air, but it certainly was significant for me. And here's what happened. There were half a dozen of us, and there was a way to come up on Milk Hill, find a tramway so that you wouldn't trample down, a tram line so that you wouldn't trample any of the crop. And we all were joyous and full of energy. And I remember running down this tram line. I just couldn't wait to try to photograph and to get into this big, huge formation. And we all sort of, because it was so huge, 400 foot long, some people stopped at this end or here. I just kept going further. And when I stopped, I had this kind of habit. I would pick up my camera and I would look through it as I go to strange places. I've always done this. And I click the photographs as I go in the unknown. And as I started walking toward one of the big circles doing that, I hit a wall. It was transparent, but it felt like jello. Like something was there and it was not letting me go into the circle. And I was so surprised. But I stopped. I kept taking pictures from the edge. And then it felt suddenly as if the jello gave way. It actually had a physical feeling. And now I'm inside and I'm tiptoeing. I'm now very respectful. I'm trying to be so careful because of that pause enforced on me. And I went clear to the end of the last circle. Everybody else was at the far end. I'm now at the furthest end. And as I came to the wall of the wheat, that was as far as I could go, I stopped and I was looking out at the growing wheat and I was thinking about what was that jello that blocked me. And this thought voice that you've heard me talk about from out of body as a child and throughout my entire life. This thought voice, it said, life is not guaranteed on this planet. And with those thoughts in my head came the most palpable impression that I was being stared at by something that reminded me in the gestalt of what I became aware of of a Bengal or Siberian tiger. I love them. I respect them. I've been in Africa and places with big cats, and I know that I can't get out of the truck and run and do this. But their keen intelligence, their incredible ability to move through matter, it was as if something was communicating and putting that image in my head. That what we are dealing with, or what we were dealing with in the crop formations, was like the intelligence and the strength, the power of a tiger. And it was communicating life on this planet is not guaranteed. And I have always thought that in the crop formations, there is a mathematical language embedded, and that if we were able to translate every crop formation that has ever happened on this planet, it might be someone else trying to show us, you've got to take care of your planet if you're going to survive. And that is a feeling I think a lot of us have today. But it was a favorite memory because it merged and overlapped the excitement and the joy and the huge pleasure of being in the crop formations with an alert, with a pause, like at that wall of Jell-O, that all is not happy, that maybe there are things that have to be repaired or they have to be learned before we could move into another kind of relationship on this planet in which that joy that we all felt in the crop formations would be the joy that we could feel around this whole planet. That's a prayer of mine. Hey, next question.
Hi, Linda. I was wondering if there was an experience in your life that made you go from thinking there may be aliens to thinking there definitely are.
The first time that I really remember vividly a physical and mental reaction to the issue of, are there really aliens, extraterrestrials in this universe, and are they interacting here on this planet, was in that discussion that I have shared with you before on my Earthfiles YouTube broadcast about Sheriff Tex Graves in northern Colorado. And that was my very first interview with law enforcement in September of 1979, 40 years ago. And it's as vivid in my mind now as it was then, when he had shown me all those photographs of all the bloodless, trackless, phenomenal animal mutilations. And I was asking him questions, and he said, Linda, I'll save you some time. The perpetrators of these animal mutilations are creatures from outer space, and then proceeded to talk about the UFOs he had seen, about the ranchers who had described seeing beams of light coming out of round glowing discs into their pasture. I ended up being able to interview 2 or 3 ranchers who would not go on camera, and they said, I watched a beam come down, and one version is some people saw an animal go up, some people saw an animal go down, but their bottom line was they waited until the sun came up, and in each case there was a bloodless, trackless, mutilated animal that convinced the ranchers they were not dealing with predators, disease, or satanic cults. They were dealing with, as Sheriff Tex Graves said, creatures from outer space. Today, now we're in the 21st century, almost a half a century later after that conversation with him. And now I think it is fair to say that there are many less people on the planet now who think we're alone, that the vast majority are just waiting for that headline like I am. We're not alone in this universe. Next question.
Hi, Linda. My name's Lois from Canada, and my question to you is, in this day and age, how is it possible that there are no credible photos of aliens? Thanks.
That is an excellent question. And as far as my understanding from people who have been either in science, military, or let's say some intel agency, who have talked to me about what they know, that the advanced technologies that have been interacting with this planet for millions of years fall into three categories. One is the projection of holograms that we cannot discern with our mind. It could be a telephone pole that an ET projected to look like a telephone pole. That's one way. The second is they use neutralizing gravity to move anything that they want, small or large. So they have the ability to manipulate the environment around us without us being aware. And the third goes directly to your question. They have a technology of invisibility that is perfect. And in their invisibility, got one of the cat's hairs on my lip. They could be, as some people in the abduction syndrome say they know, that they could be right here. We couldn't see, we see the wall. That their invisibility is a really advanced technology, and that they have used it on this planet for millennia. And therefore, that is the most perfect way, better than camouflage, to work among what might be their experiment, which would be the manipulation of DNA in already evolving primates to create a line of humanoids that we happen to be the latest model, and that they have interacted with us forever in and out of this planet. But often we haven't seen them. And that's why I do not think that there are any really good photographs of the alien beings that are so good at invisibility. Next question.
Hey Linda, it's Jonathan from Minnesota. I wanted to know, did I capture a gray alien in that picture or video that I sent you? All right, thank you.
Now, here is the photograph where he now is zooming in, and you can see what might be a large top head with a very thin chin and those big eyes. And then he pulls out to show me the rest of this room where there are cases and metal and glass, and he's looking for possible other reflection that might echo what is in that first one. And he doesn't find another reflection and comes back, goes in tightly to show this face reflection. And I can say to all of you, here's one of the reasons why things like reflections are so difficult. Because as NASA has argued often, especially on the face on Mars, maybe it's a trick of light and shadow. And in this case, maybe it is a trick of light and shadow. But if you go to Mars, I don't think it's any trick of light and shadow. I think it is a huge mile plateau that was carved as a head there. So, like all of these strange, anomalous cases, a reflection. Is it really a reflection of something, or is it a trick? Next question.
My name is Keisha, and this is my daughter Angel.
Hi.
We just came from the movies and saw Frozen. We saw what?
Rock giant.
Rock giants. Our question is, are giants real? Did they once walk the earth? Are they really these mountaintops that they say were big 30-foot giants? I'm very interested in that, and I would appreciate, Linda, if you pick my video and give me answers on this. I love you. God bless. Happy holidays, Earthfiles.
Merry Christmas!
Thank you, you guys, for your enthusiasm and for this great question about giants. You made me do some research, and I found something that kind of amazed me. It's a Tuesday, February 11th, 1902, the beginning of the 20th century. And it is a newspaper article from the New York Times. Giant skeletons found. Archaeologists to send expedition to explore graveyards in New Mexico where bodies were unearthed. Owing to the discovery of the remains of a race of giants in Guadalupe, New Mexico, Antiquarians and archaeologists are preparing an expedition further to explore that region. This determination is based on the excitement that exists among the people of a scope of country near Mesa Rico, about 200 miles southeast of Las Vegas, New Mexico, where an old burial ground has been discovered that has yielded skeletons of enormous size. Luciana Quintana, on whose ranch the ancient burial plot is located, discovered 2 stones that bore curious inscriptions, and beneath these were found in shallow excavations the bones of a frame, meaning a skeleton, that could not have been less than 12 feet in length. 12 feet. The men who opened the grave say the forearm was 4 feet long, and that in a well-preserved jaw, the lower teeth range from the size of a hickory nut to that of the largest walnut in size. The chest of the being is reported as having a circumference of 7 feet. Quintana, who has uncovered many other burial places, expresses the opinion that perhaps thousands of skeletons of a race of giants long extinct will be found. This supposition is based on the traditions handed down from the early Spanish invasion that have detailed knowledge of the existence of a race of giants that inhabited the plains of what now is eastern New Mexico. Indian legends and carvings also in the same section indicate the existence to such a race. Then, here is a book. It came out in 2017, and this is The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, The Missing Skeletons, and the Great Smithsonian Coverup. It is by Richard J. Dewhurst, and it is a study of substantial evidence of a former race of giants in North America and a 150-year-long suppression by the Smithsonian Institution. The background on this author, Richard J. Dewhurst, he is an Emmy Award-winning writer of the HBO feature documentary Dear America, Letters Home from Vietnam, a graduate of New York University with degrees of journalism, film, and television. He has written and edited for the History Channel, the Arts Entertainment Channel, PBS, Fox Television, and Fox Films, ABC News, TNT, Paramount Pictures, and the Miami Herald. And he puts into this book, in the summary, it's based on like hundreds of newspapers and all things related to the discovery of huge skeletons, and that there's this big cover-up by the Smithsonian. And I am reminded, it goes back at least 25 years ago, that in one of my investigations after doing animal mutilations and going on to human abductions, somebody told me that they had, with their own eyes, had a friend who said that in the Smithsonian, in the basement, in a walled-off section, are some of the giant skeletons that the Smithsonian got and never has shown publicly, apparently afraid of contradictions with religions and mythologies. But when do we finally grow up? We should be shown those skeletons in the Smithsonian if they are there, just like we should be shown the huge archaeology 2 miles under ice in Antarctica. And I want to thank you. I've been getting fantastic emails from people seeing my new hour documentary with Spartan 1 and Spartan 2 on the alien secrets under the ice in Antarctica. And it's fantastic to get the enthusiasm from those of you who are screening it. And I want to tell everybody in the audience tonight that it is in video on demand, in Vimeo, and Amazon.com. They both have it. They've had it both for over a week. And that all you have to do is go to earthfiles.com/Antarctica/. And that will take you to Vimeo and Amazon.com. And I hope that you will continue to explore these incredible mysteries with me. And one of the biggest that I've ever covered in my life are the big architectures that have been described by the Navy SEALs that I have talked with that are 2 miles under ice in Antarctica. So go to Vimeo, go to Amazon.com and rent or purchase Antarctica, Alien Secrets Under the Ice. And now, our next question.
Hello Linda, it's Dr. Stuart Hall, all the way from the UK. Why doesn't ET help with a nuclear global potential catastrophe? Enjoy the show. You're an international, worldwide phenomenon, and people are listening very intently in the UK.
Well, on November 7th, 1995, in the night, I was typing a medical script for the House Call TV program that I was producing at the time for the ABC affiliate in Boston, WCVB. And the phone rang. It was my brother Jim, and he sounded so excited. Linda, a UFO has set down on the base. Well, he was a helicopter pilot for the U.S. Air Force at Moulton Air Force Base in Great Falls, Montana. 9 years after that call in 1975, in 1984, this book was published by a friend of mine, Clear Intent, The Government Cover-Up of the UFO Experience. What does the government know about UFOs and why won't it tell us? With a foreword by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and this is by police officer Larry Fawcett that I had worked with, and Barry Greenwood, his co-author. And on page 27, here's what they wrote. On November 7th, 1975, remote electronic sensors triggered an alarm at Moulton Air Force Base indicating that something was violating site security. Underground in the launch control area, 2 officers noted the signal, but there was no television surveillance topside. The normal procedure for detecting what had violated security at a very sensitive Minuteman nuclear missile site was to call for a missile security helicopter to check the area. And at the same time, the sabotage alert team, known as the SAT team, consisting of 4 to 6 men, were also alerted to the fact that a violation was taking place, and they were ordered to the site. They radioed to Launch Control Facility that from their location, they were viewing a bright, glowing orange football field-sized disc that illuminated the missile site. The SAT team was ordered by the launch control people to proceed into what was called Kilo 7 site, with a nuclear missile 80 feet down under the ground. However, they responded that they refused to go any further, clearly fearful of the intimidating appearance of the object. And this huge football field-sized orange, glowing, fluorescent-looking disc rose up, and my brother told me it Dopplered off at 200,000 feet from NORAD. 2 F-106 jet interceptors were launched from Great Falls, Montana, and headed toward the K-7. The UFO continued to rise, disappeared off of radar at 200,000 feet, and all members of the SAT team were directed to the base hospital where they were psychologically tested. And it was determined that no one could identify the object that was seen, and they were traumatized. Meanwhile, targeting teams, along with computer specialists, were brought to the missile site to check out the missile, and specifically to check out the computer in the warhead that targets the missile. Amazingly, when the computer was checked, they found that the tape had mysteriously changed the target numbers at the binary code level in the magnetic tape. This is direct firsthand knowledge from my brother back in 1975, and Larry interviewed me for this book that came out in 1984, retelling my brother's firsthand experience. So, Stuart, this is an example of UFO intelligence and technology demonstrating that they can manipulate our nuclear missiles and that hopefully they will always prevent human nuclear war. Next question.
How do you think political, economic, and social conflicts will be resolved on Mars in the future?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that on Earth we have a prototype treaty that might be used on Mars. I'm talking about the Antarctic Treaty of 1959 and the related agreements. It's collectively known as the Antarctic Treaty System, and its design was to regulate international relations with respect to Antarctica, which is Earth's only continent without a native human population. For the purposes of the treaty system, Antarctica is defined as all of the land and all of the ice shelves south of 60 degrees south latitude. And the treaty entered into force in 1961, and it currently has 54 signatory parties. And that treaty sets aside Antarctica as a scientific preserve. It establishes freedom of scientific investigation and bans military activity on the continent. The treaty was the first arms control agreement established during the Cold War, and since September 2004, the Antarctic Treaty Secretariat headquarters have been located in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The 12 countries that had significant interests in Antarctica at that time were Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States. These countries established over 55 Antarctic stations for scientific cooperation that has so far been achieved in the ice of Antarctica. Now, maybe in the 21st century, the United States, China, Russia, Japan, and other nations that get to Mars can do a similar science treaty in the interests of all Earth humans. That would be, for me, that would be a goal, to not turn Mars into a political, territorial, conflicting planet, but one that tried to emulate the treaty in Antarctica for peaceful scientific investigation. So let's hope. Next question.
Hey Linda, this is Lana Norman. If you had one wish for Christmas, what would it be?
It would be to have the newly reported 150 years of life guaranteed pill. I would love to live for another 150 years, strong, vibrant, and see how everything keeps turning out, and fighting always for light. And to show you that this is not exactly a piece of science fiction, on 29 November 2015, the science section of the Telegraph in the UK had this, quote, "The world's first anti-aging drug will be tested on humans next year," meaning 2016, "in trials which could see diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's consigned to distant memory. It's called the science of senolytics, based on the word senile, senolytics. How a new pill could spell the end of aging. Scientists now believe that it is possible to actually slow down people to growing old and help them live in good health well into their 110s and 120s. Although it might seem like science fiction, researchers have already proven that the diabetes drug metformin extends the life of animals, and the Food and Drug Administration in the U.S. has now given the go-ahead for a trial to see if the same effects can be replicated in humans. If successful, it will mean that a person in their 70s would be as biologically healthy as one in their 50-year or younger. So, that is, to me, that would be the best gift I could have. And to know that you could have 150 years, no disease, no aches and pains, just go for it, that would be wonderful. Next question.
Blessings, Linda. Do you have any information regarding the use of crystals and minerals by extraterrestrials? Thank you.
That is a very good question. And what I have picked up, you are asking about the use of crystals by extraterrestrials. And one of the most important documents of all time, and it's not talked about much in the public, I think because it is actually complicated. And what it is, this is, I'm holding, are the MJ12 documents that Bob and Ryan Wood put together in a one-bound book. And this is the July 9th, 1947 letter from General Nathan Twining, replying to President Harry S. Truman, who in the first week of July, maybe this was an indication that General Twining was the only person he really trusted. President Truman asked General Twining to go from wherever he was to the Roswell, New Mexico area and to do his own firsthand, completely secret investigation and report back to Harry S. Truman. And here are excerpts that are provoked by your question about extraterrestrials and crystals. This is General Twining. It is of the collective view of this investigative body that the aircraft recovered by the Army and Air Force units near Victorio Peak and Socorro, New Mexico, are not of U.S. manufacture for the following reasons. And right here, this proves that where General Twining went was not between Corona and Roswell. There were several different crashes between May and June and July of 1947, and this happened in July. But this is not between Corona and Roswell. He says, this is General Twining, the circular disc-shaped plan-form design does not resemble any design currently under development by this command, nor of any Navy project. Remember that the bismuth, magnesium, zinc that came with the letters that I've reported, they were described as wedge-shaped, like a piece of pie. This is circular. The inability of the German scientists from Fort Bliss and White Sands Proving Ground to make a positive identification of a secret German 5 weapon out of these discs, and through the possibility that the Russians have managed to develop such a craft, maybe remains, but the lack of any markings, ID numbers, or instructions in Cyrillic, Russian language, has placed serious doubt in the minds of many that the objects recovered are not of Russian manufacture either. So General Twining is dismissing for Truman the outside of the possibility of German or Russian, and goes on here. This is General Twining's first-hand eyewitness description as described in this document. Upon examination of the interior of the craft, a compartment exhibiting a possible atomic engine was discovered. At least this is the opinion of Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, the scientist who developed the atomic bomb that we used on Japan and ended World War II, and Dr. von Karman. A possibility exists that part of the craft itself comprises the propulsion system, thus allowing the reactor to function as a heat exchanger and permitting the storage of energy into a substance unidentified for later use. This may allow the converting of mass into energy, unlike the release of energy in our atomic bombs. The description of the power room is this: a donut-shaped tube approximately 35 feet in diameter, made of what appears to be plastic material. It's translucent, surrounding a central core. The tube that is translucent is approximately 1 inch in diameter. The tube appeared to be filled with a clear substance, possibly a heavy water. A large rod centered inside the tube was wrapped in a coil of what appears to be copper material that ran through the circumference of the translucent clear tube. This may be the reactor control mechanism or a storage battery. There were no moving parts discernible within the power room. And later on, in describing this to somebody who knew more, they said that they later determined that this translucent, clear construction was like crystal, with the crystal having the liquid water, and that somehow this device is what provided propulsion to the craft that General Twining made his own personal examination. I think that it isn't even the propulsion system where crystals might come in. I've also been told that crystals are used to store, archive immense amounts of information about entire planetary systems, because the crystals, if you know what you're doing, can store so much information. Okay, the next question.
Hi, Linda, thank you for all that you do. I was wondering what you thought about the jinn and the contact phenomena.
Hey, thanks for a really interesting question. The first time that I ever encountered the possibility that the jinns in another part of the world might be what are described as greys in the United States from the late 40s on was a investigator in London who was studying Sanskrit and was studying jinn. And so the word jinns, J-I-N-N-S, when you start doing research and you look what's available, it's very interesting that there is an article that you can Google. It's called A Strange Manuscript. And it is about alien abductions equals J-I-N-N abductions. That's the title. And this goes into how investigators have given thought to the notion that the gray types and the JINNS of ancient other centuries might be one and the same, and that's why they need to be studied. And it talks about here, it says that those few jinns, JINNS, that can change shape and use this ability to trick humans. Now we're back to that invisibility, that they can go in and out of visibility by deflecting photons. That's how they do it. It's a technology that deflects photons. If photons from me were suddenly deflected by a magnetic field or something, the photons from me would not get to the lens, to you, and it would look like I suddenly popped out. That's the basis of deflecting photons to get this kind of invisibility. And the jinns, through history, have been described as disappearing and appearing, disappearing and appearing. And they said that the abductions that have been described in the jinn literature of humans come in the same kind of forms that have come in the United States and other parts of the world. And that they are also described gray in color, very large, coal black eyes, and that they are also the oldest form of aliens known to man, mentioned in the Bible and the Quran, no less. They don't have an actual physical presence and are more like what people describe as angelic realms. We're talking about the jinns. Islamic texts state that the jinn are able to materialize or disappear at will. Now, it says that this happens because they are a form of conscious intelligence, just like humans, but that they can live on a higher vibratory level without physical bodies. And this is just to give you a sort of short taste, because we're going through a lot of complex subjects. But it really is, sometimes it's worth reading about JINNS and then applying it to the 21st century stories of human abductions and the confusion about what are the alien intelligences. The grays might even be all artificial intelligence. That's been suggested. And the tall Nordics, the tall whites, the standing up reptilians. Are there three competing civilizations? That's what I've been told. Maybe the competing three have allies that come and go that might explain all of the different types. Okay, let's go to another question.
Have you thought about the correlation between David Paulides' missing 411 research and DNA harvesting as well as soul harvesting? Much love.
Okay, UFO abductions are most notable for people who report missing time, but not missing people. And the question is there any evidence that abductees are taken for good, disappear from life and families? If that happened, there would be families all over this planet looking for their loved ones, with police and sheriff reports everywhere. And then there is another facet of this question. Could there be humans abducted specifically for a soul harvest? Would they be taken for good? Would they become part of the unknown missing population? Because how do you prove the absence? How do you prove the negative? That's what David Paulides and I have talked about a lot, because it's very clear that the human abductee is here and reports missing time. Those that disappear from national parks and forests and places that David studies, they're not here to talk. So it is a huge puzzle. Well, there is this other category. Whitley Strieber and I and others have talked about this in depth, that the soul, our very soul, the animus of the matter world, could be what something else wants. Well, I had a high strangeness experience, perhaps related to the soul harvest question, in Boston, Massachusetts, in October of 1974, and I'm still here. It was intense. It was after my daughter Laura had been born in Los Angeles on March 15th, 1974, and we moved to Boston so that my then husband, Larry Howe, could do an MBA at Harvard, and that's why we were there. And because of all the television work that I had done in Los Angeles, both in documentaries and news, I was hired to do all the medical programming for the ABC station WCVB. And we had been there, Larry had arrived only by September. I'd been there with my mom and our new baby, and he arrived. And so things were just beginning to come into a kind of organization where you're in a new house, new town, new work, new school, new baby, new everything. And whether or not all of that had to do with what happened, I'm not certain. But over a period of approximately 10 days and nights, each night the same thing would happen. I would go to bed, I would become conscious, I would realize I couldn't move any part of my body. I was always on my left side. I always could see my right hand here. Larry was about 2 feet away, so we're in the same bed, but he might as well have been on the other side of the universe, because as I'm struggling each night, and told him about this each day, it's happened again, this thought voice, that wonderful protective thought voice, would come in and say, concentrate on moving your little finger. And I would concentrate as hard as I could, wanting to scream out to my husband. And then I'd make my little finger move. And I could feel my body, and I would call his name. But like so many people have reported in abductions, the person, husband, wife, child, you can't communicate with them during this very strange, we'll call it other reality that is happening in our matter world. And I hated that feeling of the paralysis. And I've been telling Larry, it happened again. I want this to stop. And eventually, it was about the 10th night that it happened again. But this time, when this broke, I just rose up like something in me was, I don't know that I was ready to fight, but I know that it was like, I want this to stop. And I rolled on to a pillow. And then I am looking at the door that we left open always in this very huge Victorian house that we had. And Laura was in a room a few feet away in a hall in us, and coming through this big door it was huge. The ceilings in the upper part of that house were 14 feet high. So the door that I'm talking about, that this massive thing came through, was taller than the door coming into my office. And the whole frame was filled by this hulking black silhouette that is moving slowly, inexorably toward me. And I remember feeling terror. I haven't felt much terror in my life. I usually go to curiosity, but this caused absolute terror. And as I felt the terror, and Larry was not waking up, and it's moving toward me, and then I felt the entire temperature of the room. It was like it went down to the freezer locker that my dad used to take my brother and me down. He would go out elk hunting in the fall, and we would always keep it in this storage locker, and Mom would make us these venison and elk steaks throughout the winter. And Dad, I remembered what it felt like when we went into that horrible freezing locker. That's exactly what this big bedroom suddenly felt like. And then came, just like that, this huge blazing white cross. If the ceiling was 14 feet high and it was at the bottom, this cross was 14 feet high. I couldn't see the bottom of it beyond the edge, the foot of the bed. And as that blazing white cross popped in, came the thought voice. Say the Lord's Prayer over and over and do not stop. And I started, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And I'm talking out loud. And I keep thinking, why is Larry not waking up? What is going on? I was completely terrified. And this thing gets right to the edge of the bed. And I'm staring at the cross, but I'm aware of its presence. And whatever battle was taking place in that room in Boston, Massachusetts, in October of 1974, the light won. This freezer locker was replaced by this warm Hawaiian feeling air. It disappears. I fall back on my pillow and realize my nightgown is drenched with perspiration. The pillow behind me feels like the locker. It was absolutely frozen. And I feel that on my back. I realize I'm completely drenched. And the thought voice comes one more time. You will never have to fight for your soul ever again from now to all time. And it has left me as this issue about the importance of our souls is that so much of the high strangeness when we do interviews is that people seem to be put through certain things, almost like we are put through exercises or challenges on purpose, trying to make the soul stronger. Because if you have a strong soul, he who believeth in him who sent me shall have everlasting life. That the recycling of the soul will go on eternally. And that is one of the most profound, high strangeness events of my life. Next question.
How will Arctic amplification affect the East Coast in the near future?
Okay, here is what Arctic amplification is about. The Arctic is getting warmer faster than any place on the Earth. And it appears to be that as the ice is melting so quickly, it's a feedback loop. The ice is melting, that means there's more dark water, more dark land. Dark water, dark land absorbs photons from the sun more, they warm up. That accelerates the melting of the ice, which then means there's more water and more land, and this is what's happening in Antarctica. The sunlight is heating, and the heating is melting, and they are now in exacerbation in a loop, and that's why the Antarctic is the fastest warming place on the Earth, and the consequences of that for the rest of the 21st century are unknown, but there's no question that they already know that species that have lived there are moving out into other waters. And then the dominoes begin to fall. If one species of marine animal ate this, and what it ate goes off someplace else to get to cooler waters, and then this one goes off, what does this that predates on them do for food? And pretty soon you either have collapses in the food chain in and out all over, or you have a completely different ecosystem beginning to develop in the oceans, which they are now and are being studied. Now, I will try to hurry through the rest of these questions.
Hi, Linda. I have a question in regards to the Kinross Incident from Michigan. I recall you interviewing the diving team over that when they had the sonar images. It all seemed legit, and then MUFON claimed it was a hoax, and then they all disappeared. Did you ever get back with that guy? Did he ever admit to creating a hoax on that? What was their motivation behind that? Thank you.
Okay, Kinross, that is an amazing story, and you should read some of the books in the 50s that were written about it. But in a summary, on September 22nd, 2006, I reported at my Earthfiles News website that in Brown City, Michigan, a company calling itself Great Lakes Dive Company had two people named Adam Jimenez and Jim Bassett who announced, they called me up, that they had discovered an F-89C, the letter C, on the bottom of Lake Superior. And they asserted that there might be an object that looked like a teardrop down there too, and they provided me photographs of what they said was the sonar, the side scan sonar of these objects. And I reported on coast to coast, and I went into the entire Major Kehoe book, Flying Saucers Top Secret, in which he actually published for the very first time actual, legitimate, real Lackland Air Force TV script, a radio script, about that disappearance. And he said in the book that at Lackland, they had actually said in a report, the question now is not if, but why and where do they come from, meaning UFOs and an alien intelligence had been up there, that this the jet had tangled with, and on radar, it looked like the jet was absorbed by the UFO. And in the official U.S. Air Force script that Kehoe was allowed to use in his book, it showed how radar operators had picked up a blip of an unknown object over the Sioux Locks up at the big Great Lakes near Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and that it looked like there had been a merging of the jet into this UFO. And no trace was ever found of the missing men, the F-89, or the UFO. So what happened to the Kinross F-89 swallowed up on radar by this UFO? These two men who came to me and to others claimed that the sonar showed that this plane was in the bottom of the lake. But within 2 weeks of that interview, they were no longer returning phone calls. Their phones were not working. They didn't answer emails. James Carrion was MUFON director at the time. He found that the company that they claimed that they were working for or with, Great Lakes Dive Company, had never been registered in the state of Michigan, and that there was no sign of either of those men who had done the coast interview with me and had sent me these side scan radar images. And it is one of those big mysteries. They came into the scene, maybe it was planted intel that their whole mission was to disappear and plant that information. No one knows. I do not know, because I interviewed them, I talked to them, everything seemed above board, legitimate, fascinating radar, but they disappeared. And anybody out there who knows anything more about this case, please get in touch with me at earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Okay, next question. We'll go a few minutes longer. It's my broadcast, so we're going to finish these questions, you guys.
Hi, Linda. What would be in your first video after disclosure?
I'll tell you. It would be this Earthfiles YouTube broadcast, me breaking open a bottle of champagne live on air with Peggy and Eric in Toronto, Brad with me in Albuquerque, yelling into the night with all of you, we're not alone in this universe. Finally, it's official. Next question.
An alien race is coming to Earth tomorrow, and world governments want you to be the voice of the planet to talk to them. What's the first thing you would tell them?
This is what I'll say to any observable non-human standing in front of me. Down with entropy, up with light. And depending upon what they put in my head as a reply to that, or their reaction, I'll know if they're a friend or an enemy. Next question.
Okay, Linda, it's Whitley, or the remains of Whitley with a bad cold. What is the most mysterious thing that has ever happened to you personally?
I think that of all of the things in my life that have left me with a huge mystery about how did it happen, but changed me more fundamentally than anything that's ever happened, including whatever that black hulk was so many years in Massachusetts. And this is the event that took place when I was in Idaho getting ready to go to the Miss America pageant, 1963. I was Miss Idaho. and that I wanted to exercise my body and get as trim as possible. And I'd ask my father if he would fly me and my brother and a cousin into the Salmon River country of Idaho, where Dad had built an airstrip as director of aeronautics for the state of Idaho. That was my father's profession. And he dropped us off for 2 weeks. And the whole goal was that I would do these runs around the airport twice a day and climb a mountain on a very specific path twice a day. And my brother and my cousin would read and fish and do all these things. And then we'd come back together at night. And the long version of this is in my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness. It's the prologue that I put in the third book because this is so significant. And so instead of the longer version, what I'm going to do tonight is, this was a routine. I knew the path. I was in a rhythm. Maybe that's why. I have no idea. But when I got near the top of the path on the mountain that I had been doing, to my left were orange, beautiful orange beams, like sun coming down through the Ponderosa. And it was like I had never seen light before. And I can still remember the moment vividly, when everything in me simply wanted to get across about 20 feet and to at least touch, maybe get in and let this beautiful orange light drench me. That was sort of what I was thinking. And then it was like I'm moving, 96 frames, very huge slow motion like this. I can still remember what it looked like, even almost what it felt like. Something changed. The thing I do not remember at all is getting to the orange beams. The very next memory inside of the slow motion is I'm back down at the bottom of this mountain hill on the path where I had started. And there is a beautiful June orchidy flower, and it's pulsing this orchid white light. And I'm so startled because it is so vivid. There's nothing about it that it's just vivid, real. And something in me, again, sort of wanted to break whatever this spell is that I have entered, this other reality. And I began to run, and I stopped about 20, 25 feet. And then as far as I could see, all of the flowers are pulsing this orchid white light. And above me, I look up on the mountain that I've just come down, and it's like breathing, like the Van Gogh at the end of his life when he drew the energy that was cycling in the mountains with different colors and making it look like waves. That's what I was looking at in this mountain. And then I realized that there were some stars that came out, as can happen up there. The sun goes down way behind the mountain and you see your first stars, and they were pulsing. Everything was pulsing. White orchid light. And then it felt like the same warm jello that I would feel in 1993 in England when I was stopped by that wall of the jello from getting into that crop formation and encountered that thought voice that not all life is guaranteed. It was the same thing. It felt like jello lifted up my hands all the way up to in front of me, and I'm looking into my own palms as this voice says, "You are one with the light is one with you, and you are in the hands of God forever." And I didn't take my hands down. I just held them in a state of astonishment. And then whatever makes that jello let go, and my own hands drifted down, and I stood there looking out across the field with all the still pulsing flowers. And it began to rheostat like a count of 10 slowly down, where everything went back to what we would call normal. But from that moment on to this moment sitting in front of you right now, in these lights, in my office, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, grateful that I can share some of this with you on a weekly basis. What happened in that Idaho mountain left me more than anything I could ever have read or seen in a movie. It left me with the firm, profound conviction in my soul that I was given the gift that this is what is underneath everything. Pulsing light. And it leaves you with a mystery. Why are we in a universe where the yin and the yang symbol, black and the white and the black, the conflict between the pluses and the minuses, entropy versus light, always go with down with entropy, up with light. I love you. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Hanukkah, every holiday. And I'll see you in the new year of 2020. And maybe we're going to get some truth in that headline. I love you.